In our headlines on this Monday afternoon, March 18th, here on the Korean Peninsula. North Korea launches what are believed to be several short-range ballistic missiles toward the EC this morning, days after the end of South Korea's large-scale military exercise with the US, which the regime says is a war rehearsal. And professors of medicine here in South Korea agreed to extend the deadline for their collective resignation to next Monday, March 25th, while calling on the government to reconsider its plan to raise medical school admissions quota. Meanwhile, in Russia, President Vladimir Putin thanks voters for their faith as he looks to win a fifth term at the top office, with early counts showing him securing 87% of the ballots cast, according to the country's election body. We start with news of a fresh display of defiance by Pyongyang, which comes days after a joint military drill by Seoul and Washington and coincides with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's visit to South Korea for the Summit for Democracy. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
North Korea fired what is presumed to be multiple short-range ballistic missiles toward the EC Monday morning. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff detected several SRBMs at 7:44 a.m. launched toward the EC from the Pyongyang area. It appears that at least 3 ballistic missiles flew approximately 300 kilometers northeast. The flight distance from Pyongyang to South Korea's Gaeryongdae military headquarters is also approximately 300 kilometers. Japanese authorities said the missiles reached a maximum altitude of about 50 kilometers. Given this data, experts believe it is likely that the SRBMs were KN-25s, which have allegedly been exported to Russia. South Korea's military strongly condemned North Korea's missile launch as a provocation that seriously threatens peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. The JCS added that it has strengthened surveillance and vigilance in preparation for additional launches and is maintaining a full readiness posture by closely cooperating with U.S. and Japanese authorities. According to Professor Yang Mu-jin at the University of North Korean Studies, the North's provocation has been timed to correspond with U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken's arrival in Seoul to attend the Summit for Democracy.
Considering that the launch coincided with U.S. Secretary of State Blinken's visit to South Korea, I believe the North intended to display discomfort and put pressure on the U.S.
The launch comes over a month after North Korea fired multiple rounds of cruise missiles toward the EC. It's the second ballistic missile launch of the year, with the previous launch coming in January. Experts believe North Korea has remained rather low-key over the past few weeks in terms of threats and provocations, even during Seoul and Washington's Freedom Shield military exercise that wrapped up last week due to important political events in Russia and China. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Right, and as mentioned, Seoul is hosting the third Summit for Democracy starting today, that is Monday, and President Yoon Suk-yeol opened the 3-day event earlier this morning by highlighting the importance of action to bolster faith in democracy. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol called for joint efforts to defend and advance democratic freedoms for future generations amid fast-evolving digital changes that threaten freedom, human rights and prosperity. This came at the opening ceremony of the third Summit for Democracy, which kicked off in Seoul on Monday, gathering world leaders, civil society and the private sector under the theme of democracy for the future generation.
개인의 자유와 창의를 북돋우는 활기찬 민주주의는 청년들의 역량과 기회를 확장하는 촉진제가 될 것이며 이를 통해 우리의 미래 세대는 민주주의에 대해 더욱 확고한 믿음을 갖게 될 것입니다.
Citing fake news and disinformation as major threats to democracy, Yoon said artificial intelligence and new digital tools pose a double-edged sword to societies and individuals. He also warned against the growing digital divide between nations that would widen economic gaps and, in turn, increase the democracy divide. He called for efforts to ensure digital progress goes hand in hand with democracy. This year's summit begins with a ministerial-level meeting co-hosted by the United Kingdom and Ecuador, followed by an expert roundtable on democratic processes to address cyber threats and foster digital innovation in a way that respects human rights and freedom in online spaces. On the second day, members of civil society will hold discussions and workshops on related themes. The plenary session of world leaders will be held virtually on Wednesday evening Seoul time, with President Yoon Suk-yeol chairing the session on technology, elections and fake news. Kenyan President William Ruto will lead a session on the Global South, and Danish leader Mette Frederiksen on inclusive society and youth empowerment. The Summit for Democracy was launched in 2021 under the leadership of US President Joe Biden amid the worrying rise of autocratic leaders and authoritarian governance around the world. Deeming South Korea a champion of democracy, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Monday remarked on the significance of the country hosting the summit independently for the first time outside the United States. Blinken and South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-ho called for collective efforts by governments and society to strengthen confidence in democracy around the world, with the two officials scheduled to have a luncheon meeting, likely to focus on North Korea's missile provocation earlier in the day, alongside topics including democratic cooperation, strengthening the ROK-US alliance, as well as regional and global issues. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Over in Russia, President Vladimir Putin looks to win his fifth term in office as his military campaign against Ukraine continues. Our Lee Seung-jae has details.
To no one's surprise, Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to win his fifth term as the country's leader. According to a number of Russian opinion poll organizations, exit polls show that an overwhelming number of voters had picked Putin. Russia's Central Election Commission also revealed that with 60% of the votes counted, Putin had an overwhelming lead, with over 87% voting for the incumbent leader. On the verge of winning yet another presidential election, Putin on Sunday called on Russia to become stronger and more effective, thanking the Russian people for voting. He also mentioned the soldiers fighting in what he referred to as special operations against Ukraine, while emphasizing that the source of Russian power is the Russian people. A win for Putin will mean he will be in office until at least 2030, when he will be turning 77, making him Russia's longest-serving leader since Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. Putin has had little to no challenge during his rule, with most opposition candidates either dead, jailed, or barred from running for office. Russian presidential elections were held every 4 years until the law was changed in 2008 to extend the term to 6 years, while more constitutional changes in 2020 removed the presidential term limits. However, one person ensured that Putin didn't get her vote, as Yulia Navalnaya, the widow of Alexei Navalny, said Sunday that she wrote her late husband's name on the ballot. Navalny's supporters also held demonstrations at polling stations throughout Russia while voting for other candidates or invalidating votes. In a video message on Sunday, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky criticized Putin, calling him sick with power, adding that the Russian leader is willing to do anything to stay in power. Zelensky also stressed that everything Putin has done in occupying Ukraine is a crime, emphasizing that he should be tried at The Hague for war crimes. The Ukrainian leader also said that there's no legitimacy in the Russian elections. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The collective action by Korea's medical arena began with its junior doctors walking out of hospitals, followed by medical students taking leaves of absence. And come next Monday, their professors are poised to resign en masse should the government fail to back down from its plan to expand medical school admissions quota. Our Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
Junior doctors are not alone in deciding to walk away from their work sites. Professors at medical schools have also chosen to submit resignation letters starting next Monday, March 25th. Professors from 20 or half of South Korea's medical schools were present at a meeting late on Friday, with professors from 16 schools deciding overwhelmingly to resign. The 4 remaining schools are reportedly collecting opinions over whether and when to join in. Resignation submissions are set to start on the 25th, but dates could differ depending on each medical school's schedule. Professors from Seoul National University's medical school had previously decided to file resignations starting this Monday, but have decided to reschedule accordingly. The chief of the medical professors group strongly urged the government to back down from the plan to raise the enrollment quotas at med schools from 3,058 to 5,058 per year starting in 2025.
We desperately ask for a first step to be made to start discussions. We ask the government even more. Please let go of the figure of 2,000. Otherwise, we cannot start discussions at all.
To this, Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong expressed serious concerns during a meeting at the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters held on Monday morning. While underlining that it is not acceptable to negotiate while holding people's lives hostage, the minister urged professors to work with the government so that trainee doctors could return to duties.
We should not negotiate over people's lives in any case. Please persuade trainee doctors and students who left hospitals and schools to return and participate in discussing reform tasks for the improvement of the healthcare system.
The minister said he would continue talks with directors not only from the 5 major hospitals, but also those at national hospitals. Those talks are slated for Monday and Tuesday. He also mentioned that intensive care units and emergency rooms would be closely monitored to prevent medical disruptions. As part of efforts to improve the healthcare system, the ministry announced additional reformative measures for the fee-for-service system. Also, regarding previous plans to inject some $7.5 billion for essential medical departments by 2028, it gave specific guidelines for compensation. $3.75 billion for surgical and internal medicine departments, and over $2 billion for pediatrics and childbirth. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
On the political front, Korea's 22nd general election is roughly 3 weeks away, and official registration is scheduled to start Thursday this week. That being said, political parties are now finalizing their candidate rosters. Our correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
Rival parties' candidate nomination processes for April's general election are coming to a close. The ruling People Power Party on Sunday nominated 3 more candidates to finish up its official nomination process. They have nominated candidates for all of the 254 electoral districts in the country during the process, which lasted more than a month. This is the first time in 16 years that the PPP have filled in names for all districts. Of the 113 PPP members in the assembly as of February, when the nomination process started, 57.3% received official nominations for the district they represent. The average age of the nominees is around 58. The Democratic Party is also finishing up its nominations, finalizing candidates for 250 districts as of Monday morning. Of the 163 DP members of the current assembly, 63 members, or 38.7%, did not receive official nomination for the district they represent. The average age of nominees is around 57. On Sunday, the party held a special ceremony at the National Assembly, handing out certificates of nomination to its candidates. Meanwhile, proportional representation candidates who aren't elected to represent a certain district but are elected based on voter support for their party representation are also being listed. The PPP-created satellite party, the People Future Party, is soon expected to announce its list of proportional representation nominees, while the Democratic Alliance of Korea, a satellite party formed by the DP and other opposition parties including the Progressive Party and the New Progressive Union, have finalized their list of nominees. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
In other news, Korea's southern resort island of Jeju played host to dozens of diplomats this past weekend as its governor called for active diplomacy beyond the borders of the metropolitan arena. Our Park Gon-woo was there.
Jeju Island, a tourist mecca in South Korea, is taking steps toward becoming a pioneer of international diplomacy between local governments. And as part of that aim, Jeju has targeted becoming a leader in new industries, including space technology and urban air mobility, and solving global issues such as the climate crisis, while collaborating with cities in other countries.
Subnational diplomacy is needed to increase the number of tourists and promote exports overseas instead of just focusing on the metropolitan area.
While speaking about the importance of sustainable tourism, he also said Jeju will focus on decarbonization by utilizing renewable energy and implementing new transportation methods such as UAM. To share related plans, ambassadors to Korea from 25 countries, including France, Lebanon, and Guatemala, were invited to Jeju from Friday to Saturday as part of a diplomacy program. A visit to a factory run by Jeju's Hamdasu, a local public enterprise water brand that is consistently working to improve its carbon footprint, was one of the main items on the agenda.
They have been taking measures to take care of all the issues regarding climate change. And on that regard, this is something what the world needs.
During their stay, the ambassadors also experienced the cultural aspects of Jeju. Traditional performances were put on for the ambassadors, while traditional food made from regional products, including red-banded lobster, abalone, and sea urchin were served, so that they could feel the taste of Jeju. Hiking on the famous Jeju Orle trails was another itinerary item for the diplomats to enjoy.
I was very impressed, of course, by the nature of Jeju, which is really very fascinating, with the beautiful sea and volcanoes and flowers.
He also spoke about future collaborative plans with Jeju.
As Jeju is developing green energy, green mobilities, and as in France, we are also working very hard to transition to that kind of future decarbonization. There's a lot that we can accomplish together.
Along with these efforts, Jeju also aims to host the APEC summit in November next year. All eyes are on whether the city will be chosen to host the event. 박건우, Arirang News, Jeju.
Now, earlier last week, we shed light on a group of Harvard students here in Korea trading sounds of music for some peace of mind. Well, in this next report, our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin has a follow-up story on their stage performance and more. To take a listen.
It's the oldest orchestra in the United States. With a history spanning over 2 centuries, the Harvard Radcliffe Orchestra is composed of more than 100 Harvard University students. And while they may be students, their performances do not fall behind those of professional musicians. Since 1962, the HRO has been touring worldwide, gracing stages in over 18 countries across 4 continents. This year, they're back in Korea, a country close to their hearts and one they last visited in 2015.
Very good and collaborative relationship with Korea. We have a lot of alumni who are here in Korea. A lot of our students are Koreans or with Korean heritage. Korea is, of course, a particularly good place from a classical music standpoint. It's very advanced, which makes it a much more rewarding experience.
For these young musicians, touring isn't just about playing to bigger crowds. It's a chance to harmonize with diverse cultures, creating a symphony of understanding.
Yeah, just to have a lot of collaboration across different cultures and across with a unified vision of that music can bring people together, whether we speak the same language as I was saying before, or whether we're from different places.
This is my first time in the country, even though I guess I am Korean, 100% Korean. I've never been to Korea. I've never even been to Asia, and it's been great just kind of exploring what the culture is like here and get.
Their Seoul concert, which kicked off the orchestra's tour, was all about inclusion and harmony. Together with Korea's Beautiful Mind Orchestra, which is comprised of students with disabilities, they performed Arirang Fantasy, a variation of the Korean folk song Arirang, and Mambo by the late Leonard Bernstein, a distinguished Harvard alum.
It makes me feel proud when I play the violin.
I can touch people through music and give them hope. Playing the flute gives me hope and confidence because it makes me feel that I can also do something meaningful.
The Harvard Radcliffe Orchestra strikes a chord that resonates beyond barriers, showing that music truly is a universal language. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. French President Emmanuel Macron said Russia will be asked to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine during the upcoming Paris Olympics. Macron was speaking in an interview shown on Ukrainian television on Saturday. In response, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said France should first stop its weapon supplies to Ukraine, adding that Macron should have proposed the same ceasefire for the Middle Eastern conflict. Macron's interview comes after the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, said last week she would prefer it if Russians and Belarusians don't come to the Paris Olympics. The International Olympic Committee has previously condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 on account of it breaching the Olympic truce of promoting peace and cooperation through the power of sports. Protesters in Israel blocked major roads and scuffled with police in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem on Saturday evening as they call for new elections and an immediate hostage deal. Over the past few weeks, protesters have routinely interrupted traffic. However, Saturday was the first time demonstrators in Jerusalem blocked the roads at Paris Square. The protesters sang the Israeli national anthem and carried placards that read "Election now, and you will not stop us." A protester named Rimon Nissan said, "We're here to protest this government that hasn't been acting for the majority of people in Israel for a while now. It's creating more tension between Arabs and Jewish people. We think it's actively harming us during the war and beyond it." Cities around the world turned green over the weekend to celebrate St. Patrick's Day on March 17th in honor of Ireland's patron saint. In central Tokyo, bagpipers, marching bands, and dancers performed around Harajuku, celebrating the Irish tradition with green outfits and shamrocks. In New York, Manhattan began turning green on Saturday as large crowds prepared for the annual St. Patrick's Day parade. Politicians and members of the New York City fire and police services march alongside performers and bands on Sunday. Ireland's victory in rugby's Six Nations on Saturday added an extra dimension to celebrations as the Irish took their second title in a row. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It was a cold start to the new week. Spring cold triggered cold wave alerts to many inland regions, with morning temperatures dropping nearly 10 degrees lower than yesterday. But highs are soaring fast this afternoon, leading to wide temperature differences. Most regions are seeing highs in the low to mid-teens, similar to slightly lower than Sunday. Seoul getting up to 13 degrees, Gwangju, Gyeongju topping out at 17 degrees Celsius. Mostly sunny skies expected across Korea. Meanwhile, most of the eastern parts of the country and Chungcheong-do provinces are under a dry weather advisory along with strong winds, so fire safety is a must. Meanwhile, the dry air should ease with spring precipitation in the forecast tomorrow. It will either rain or snow from central and Jeollabuk-do province, gradually spreading to the rest of the country. Mountainous regions in Gangwon-do province will see snow instead. Be mindful of chilly mornings this week and do dress accordingly. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions. And those are the headlines at this hour here in Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session. Do stay with us.